Japan does not do dramatic endings. Other countries have ghost towns that burned, flooded, or were swallowed overnight by something sudden and visible. Japan's ghost towns mostly just continue. The post office still has hours posted on the door. The vending machine still accepts payment. The traffic light still cycles. The community notice board still stands at the corner of an intersection where no one turns anymore. The towns in this video did not collapse. They did not end. They simply reached a point where the number of people needed to justify their existence dropped below the threshold, and then kept going anyway, sustained by infrastructure, by habit, by the particular Japanese reluctance to officially declare anything over. In this video, we are counting down 12 Japanese towns that forgot to stop existing. Stay with me to the end, because number 1 is a place that found the most extraordinary possible answer to the question of what you do when everyone has left. So hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let us begin. Ikaho, Gunma Prefecture. 2 hours northwest of Tokyo, in the volcanic highlands of Gunma, a stone-stepped street climbs a hillside between rows of old wooden buildings. The steps, 365 of them, were built to represent every day of the year. They are still there. At the top, hot spring water still flows from the earth, running brown with the iron minerals that have made Ikaho famous since the Edo period. The bathwater is still hot. The springs have not changed. Everything else has. Ikaho was one of Japan's most celebrated onsen resorts for 3 centuries. The therapeutic iron waters drew the sick and the wealthy from Tokyo. When the bubble economy collapsed in the early 1990s, younger Japanese redirected their spending overseas. The large ryokan hotels that defined the resort began to close, 1 per decade, then 1 per year, then several at once. Today, some ryokans still operate. Some shops are still open, but shuttered windows stand where illuminated lanterns once hung. Faded signage marks sealed entrances. The physical infrastructure of a resort that accommodated thousands now accommodates hundreds, maintaining the form of prosperity while the substance has mostly gone. The springs still flow. The water is still hot. The steps are still numbered 365. The question Ikaho cannot answer is how many more years of this particular kind of continuing it has left. Yashima, Kagawa Prefecture. On a flat-topped plateau rising above Takamatsu on Shikoku, there was once a functioning town, not a village. A town with department stores, a bowling alley, a hotel, an aquarium, and a cable car that carried visitors from the city below to the summit above. Yashima is a site of the famous 1185 Battle of Dan no Ura, and for much of the 20th century, this history combined with extraordinary views of the Seto Inland Sea made it one of the most visited destinations in the Shikoku region. The decline began when a new road made the cable car less essential. Then the attractions around it began to close. The department store, the bowling alley, the hotel. The cable car itself suspended operations in 2005 and has not reopened. The plateau is unchanged. The flat summit drops away in cliffs on all sides, with views across the inland sea, unchanged since 1185. The ancient temple still receives pilgrims. The deer that have lived on the summit for centuries still wander between the buildings, and among them, the closed bowling alley, the shuttered hotel, the hollow shell of the department store, The town that was built on top of one of Japan's most significant historical battlefields simply ran out of visitors before it ran out of buildings. Sado Island, Niigata Prefecture. Sado Island sits in the Sea of Japan off the Niigata coast. For much of Japanese history, it was a place of exile. Emperors and political inconveniences were sent there when elimination was inadvisable and proximity was intolerable. Close enough to be technically still Japan, far enough to be effectively gone. A gold mine discovered in the late 16th century transformed Sado from a place of punishment into a place of forced labor. At the peak of Edo period production, the island had a population approaching 100,000. The mine was worked by convicts and the destitute. It made the Tokugawa shogunate wealthy, and made Sado an island people came to against their will and sometimes left in boxes. The gold ran out over centuries. The mine closed definitively in 1989. Today, Sado's population is less than 50,000 and falling, less than half the Edo period peak. The fishing villages of the interior and remote coastlines lose young adults to Niigata and Tokyo every year. Sado has taiko, drumming. It has no theater. It has centuries of cultural depth. None of this has reversed the arithmetic of departure. The exiles are gone. The gold is gone. The people are leaving. The island is not going anywhere. The silk towns of the Mogami Valley. Yamagata. In the mountain valleys of Yamagata Prefecture, the towns that grew along the Mogami River, during the silk industry's peak, carry their prosperity in their architecture. The merchant houses, the storehouses, the temples funded by silk fortunes, the civic buildings constructed during the Meiji and Taisho eras, when the region was producing fabric sold in London and New York. This infrastructure is still standing, maintained with the particular Japanese care for structural preservation, occupied by a fraction of the population that built it. The Yamagata silk industry was at its height in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The cold climate suited sericulture. The river provided transport. The merchant class became wealthy in ways that left permanent physical evidence, buildings of scale and quality that announced prosperity to anyone who arrived. The industry declined as textiles follow everywhere, replaced by cheaper overseas production and then by synthetic fabrics. The warehouses that stored silk bolts now store things of less value or nothing at all. What the silk towns have that most declining Japanese towns do not is the physical evidence of what they were. The buildings are too good to demolish. They stand maintained by heritage budgets and community pride, populated by a shadow of the people they were built to contain. The merchant houses outlasted the merchants. The storehouses outlasted the silk. The Oki Islands, Shimane Prefecture. The Oki Islands lie in the Sea of Japan, 80 kilometers offshore from the Shimane coast. Like Sado, they have a history of exile. The Emperor Go-Toba was sent to Oki in 1221 after a failed uprising. He died there 22 years later without ever being permitted to leave. The island retained its association with imperial punishment for centuries. The Oki Islands also have the IMA divers, women who free-dived for abalone and shellfish without breathing equipment, maintaining a tradition that predated written Japanese history. They sustained a livelihood and a cultural identity simultaneously. The AMA tradition has not disappeared entirely, but the community that supported it has contracted severely. fishing stocks have declined. Young people leave, for whom island fishing represents constraint rather than identity. The population has fallen to around 13,000, less than half its post-war peak. On the outer islands, accessible only by small ferry, stone walls enclose gardens that have become jungles. The harbor shrines are maintained because the obligation of maintenance is among the last things that keeps people in places after all other reasons have gone. The Amea dive into cold, deep water as they always have. The sea is the same. The women who enter it are fewer every decade. The islands are still there. The question is for how much longer they are still theirs. Makurazaki, Kagoshima Prefecture. At the southern tip of Kyushu, facing the East China Sea, the port city of Makurazaki built its identity around katsuobushi, the dried bonito flakes foundational to Japanese cuisine, as the basis of dashi stock. The umami foundation of miso soup, ramen, and the sauces that define everyday Japanese cooking. Makurazaki produces more katsuobushi than any other location in Japan. The processing facilities, the drying houses, the particular smell of smoking fish on production days, all of this continues. But the community built around it is contracting. Processing is increasingly mechanized, requiring fewer workers. The fishing fleet has shrunk as bonito stocks fluctuated, and the economics of distant water fishing became harder to sustain. What makes Makurazaki's decline different from a coal town is that the product still exists. The demand for katsuobushi has not collapsed. Japanese people still make dashi. The industry has not disappeared. It is rationalized, concentrated, and mechanized in ways that require fewer people to produce the same output. The town built to house those people is too large for the workforce that remains. The harbor still smells of smoking fish on production days. The streets away from the harbor are quieter every year. Koza, Okinawa City, Okinawa Prefecture. In the center of Okinawa Island, the area known as Koza now, officially part of Okinawa City, carries the physical residue of the American military presence that defined the island's post-war history. Koza was the entertainment district that grew up outside Kadena Air Base to serve American servicemen stationed there during the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the decades of Cold War presence that followed. At its peak in the 1960s and 1970s, Koza was a district of extraordinary energy. American bars, Okinawan music venues, import goods shops, everything that emerges when large numbers of young servicemen are stationed far from home. The music that developed here, a hybrid of American rock and Okinawan traditional forms, influenced Japanese popular music for decades. The reduction of American military presence drained the economic foundation. The physical fabric remained buildings designed to American commercial aesthetics in a Japanese urban environment. English-language signage still readable on shuttered facades. Today, vintage American cars are displayed, and a few music venues still operate. But the streets between these functioning nodes are a documentation of departure. Buildings standing long after the reason for their existence has retreated. Nagoro, Tokushima Prefecture. In a mountain valley in Tokushima Prefecture on Shikoku, the village of Nagoro has approximately 30 human residents. It also has approximately 400 scarecrows. The scarecrows were made by a resident named Tsukimi Ayano, who returned to her native village in 2003 after years in Osaka to find the community contracted to near disappearance. Her response was to begin making life-sized fabric figures and placing them in the locations where people used to be. A scarecrow farmer in the field where a farmer used to work. Scarecrow children at the desks of the closed school. Scarecrow workers at the bus stop. The project began as a private act of memory and grief. It became internationally known. Photographers came from across the world to document a village populated primarily by fabric replicas of the people who had left or died. The scarecrows weather and fade. Some have been in place long enough to become part of the landscape, their fabric darkened by years of rain and sun. The scarecrow children at the desks of the closed school are grief made from fabric. They are more honest about what has happened to rural Japan than anything a municipal planning document has ever said. Aoshima, Ehime Prefecture. Aoshima is a small island in the Seto Inland Sea, accessible by a single ferry that runs once or twice a day from the Ehime coast. The island has approximately 15 human permanent residents, most of them elderly. It has approximately 200 cats. The cats arrived as functional animals kept to control rats that threatened fishing equipment and stored food. Fed, tolerated, and gradually multiplied as the human population declined. As the people left, the cats stayed. In the absence of human competition for the island's resources, they multiplied. Aoshima became internationally known through social media photographs in the early 2000s. The images showed cats dramatically outnumbering people, moving through harbor and streets with the confident ease of animals that understood they were in charge. What the photographs do not always show is the actual condition of the settlement. The houses the cats occupy are abandoned houses. The boats they sit on are mostly boats that no longer go to sea. The fishing community infrastructure is the infrastructure of an industry that has contracted to almost nothing. The cats are not living in a quaint fishing village. They are living in the ruins of one. Kanita Women's Village, Aomori Prefecture. In the mountains near Aomori, there exists a settlement unlike any other in this video. Kanita Women's Village was established in 1981 by a woman named Yuasa Yoshiko as an intentional community specifically for women who had no other options, women who had been abused, abandoned, institutionalized, or otherwise excluded from mainstream Japanese society. The village was designed to be self-sufficient. The women who lived there grew food, raised animals, built and repaired their own structures, and organized their community without male participation or oversight. In the context of Japan in the 1980s, this was a radical act. At its peak, Kanita housed dozens of women. It was never wealthy. Yuasa sustained it through decades of fundraising and the kind of uncompromising conviction that builds things other people say cannot be built. Yuasa Yoshiko died in 2022. The buildings are there. The land is there. The idea that generated them is preserved in the women who built their lives at Kanita when nowhere else in Japan would have them. Kanita is not a ghost town, not yet. But it is a place whose future is genuinely uncertain because its existence depended so completely on the will of a single person. Whether it continues will be determined by the people who remain there in a settlement that defied expectations for over 40 years. The Noto Peninsula Villages, Ishikawa Prefecture. On January 1st, 2024, an earthquake of magnitude 7.6 struck the Noto Peninsula in Ishikawa Prefecture. The shaking lasted over 2 minutes. When the motion stopped, significant portions of the peninsula's historic villages, the Wajima lacquerware town, the salt pan communities of the Okinoto coast, the fishin hamlets along the Sea of Japan shoreline had been damaged or destroyed. The Noto Peninsula was already in quiet decline before the earthquake. Its population had been falling for decades. Many of the communities hardest hit had already been identified as Genkai Shuraku, limit villages on the edge of unsustainability. The earthquake accelerated what was already underway. Residents evacuated. Many were elderly. Many had family elsewhere, urging them not to return to a peninsula where roads were broken and rebuilding would take years. Some villages answered with a clear yes to return. The Wajima morning market, which had operated for 1,000 years, began to resume. But other communities faced a harder calculation. The earthquake gave people who had been thinking about leaving an immediate reason to go. Noto, in 2024, was a peninsula that had been forgetting to stop existing for 30 years. The earthquake reminded it that stopping was an option. The Scarecrow Census. What Nagoro really means. We began this video counting down towns that forgot to stop existing, towns sustained by infrastructure and habit, and the Japanese reluctance to declare anything definitively over, towns where the post office still has hours, and the traffic light still cycles, and the vending machine still accepts payment. Nagoro is the last entry because it is the most honest. Every town in this video has an absence at its center. The absence of the young, the absence of the workers, the absence of the industry, the fish, the silk, the military, the tourists who stopped coming. In most of these towns, the absence is invisible. You have to read the shuttered facades and the oversized streets to understand what the present is a remnant of. In Nagoro, the absence has been given a body. Tsukimi Ayano's scarecrows are a census of the missing. Each figure stands in the location of a specific person who is no longer there. 30 human residents share their village with 400 fabric witnesses. The witnesses do not leave. They stand in the rain and the sun, holding the shape of the people who preceded them, waiting for nothing in particular, in a village that has not yet decided to stop. Japan has thousands of places like Nagoro. Nagoro is the only one that made the emptying visible. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Make sure to share it with your friends, and see you in the next video.